Welcome to the Not Old Better Show Good Housekeeping interview series on radio and podcast. The show covering all things health, wellness, culture, kitchen, cooking, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better. Now here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
Today's episode is brought to you by Wayfair. It's Way Day at Wayfair from April 25th through the 27th. You can score the best deals in home, like up to 80% off with free shipping on everything. Wayfair.com. Check it out now. Our guest today is Michael Clinton. Michael Clinton has done something most of us only talk about. He's lived multiple lives, all in one lifetime. By way of introduction, from humble beginnings in a Pittsburgh housing project to becoming the president and publishing director of Hearst Magazines, Michael Clinton is also a writer at large for Esquire and a regular contributor to Men's Health. Michael Clinton rose to great heights in the media world, yet came from a nearly impoverished background. Michael Clinton grew up in a working-class family in Pittsburgh, the oldest of 6 kids. He was the first in his family to go to college before moving to New York with $60 to his name. Can you just imagine? In just 10 years, Michael Clinton would become publisher of GQ magazine, making him the youngest person ever to hold the job at that time, to running marathons on all 7 continents, flying planes, traveling to more than 120 countries. He's done a lot more in one lifetime than many of us. And then at a moment when many people might slow down, he did something unexpected. He didn't retire, he refired. And that idea, refiring your life instead of winding it down, is at the heart of his powerful book, Roar. Roar into the second half of your life. It's not just a book, it's a challenge to rethink what aging really means, to question the quiet assumptions we carry about getting older, and to ask, maybe for the first time in a long time, what do I still want? Because here's the truth. Michael Clinton puts this right in front of us in today's conversation. If you're 50, 60, or even 70 today, there's a very real chance you have decades of meaningful, active life ahead. So the question becomes, what are you going to do with it? Today, we're not just talking about aging. We're talking about identity, reinvention, purpose, and the courage to begin again. Please join me in welcoming author, traveler, photographer, one of the most compelling voices on what it means to live fully in life's second half, Michael Clinton. Michael Clinton, what a joy it is for me to talk to you. I sure appreciate your time this day. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, Paul. Great to be with you. I'm very excited to have this conversation.
Me too. I'll tell you, your book, Roar, which we will talk about, among other things, just really resonated. And I know our audience is just going to love this, but I want to flip the script for just a second with you, because in the book, and I know throughout your career, which we'll chat a little bit about, you have interviewed so many people. You've really been kind of on the other side of the microphone. And I wonder, when it comes to aging, when it comes to this idea about reinvention, what's a question that surprised you that no one really is talking about with regard to those subjects of aging and reinvention?
Well, one of the things that I talk about in the book, and of course, the whole longevity phenomena, is that if you're 65 and healthy today, there's a very real chance that you're going to live to be 95 and maybe 100. And, with the developments in medicine and technology and AI and precision medicine and all the things we know, GLP-1s, we're living in an incredible time in history. And what is interesting is this is not quite on the radar of people's mind yet, that 100 is going to become what 80 is today. And, I always, when I give speeches around the country, because I do a lot of speaking on the subject, I always ask the audience, how many in the audience want to live to be 100? And, I get some hands, about half the hands go up. And then I say, how many people would like to live to be 100 if you've got cognitive and mobility and, purpose, and all the hands go up. But no one has ever asked me, Michael, would you like to live to be 100?
Okay, I missed that
And the
one.
answer is yes, as long as all those elements are in place. So yeah, so it's an interesting discussion, this 100-year life. I think I'm on the Stanford University Center on Longevity. Today's 5-year-old, the science says will have a 50% chance to live to be 100. So it's gonna be normalized in the next, decades, this 100-year life. The UN projects by 2100 there will be 25 million people in the world who are 100 or older. Today, there are about 770,000. So, think about that. We're on this interesting path. And so the reinvention in the second half of life could never be more relevant since all the structures that we have are going to change and will have to change.
The book, of course, is titled Roar. It is wonderful. It's into the second half of your life before it's too late. You write about this great framework that you really have developed throughout the book, and I wonder, has there ever been a moment where the framework didn't really apply to your life? Were you kind of off script at some points, and how did you kind of handle that?
You have a couple of hours. Li- life is messy and things don't
Yeah.
always go the way we want. I think it's a lot of it comes from people always ask me, is it nature or nurture? And, I was the product of a poor working class family growing up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so when I always say the bucket was very empty, fortunately, I had loving parents and, there was food on the table. But I had to learn at a very young age that if I was going to move forward, I had to constantly reimagine who I was. And I'm the first person in my family to go to college. My family history, many, many have followed. We have PhDs and master's degrees now in the family, which is great. But, during that process, there's always disappointments and there's always messiness and there's always things that don't go your way. But I think I built that muscle to learn how to pivot and
Mhm.
reimagine given the setup because of where I came from.
Mhm.
I had to be scrappy. I had to be, inventive. I came to New York with $60 in my pocket to try and get a job in publishing. So, I just had this skill set that I honed early in so that when the messiness hit, um, I was able to sort of navigate it. And so it's a learned skill, I think. It's a learned skill.
And I love this idea of reimagining things because I certainly hear from my audience all the time that they're thinking one or two steps ahead. They're trying to get a grasp on this subject because it's such a powerful one. I wonder, in your background, any time that you kind of deliberately chose to kind of ignore maybe a previous step in life that was perhaps a stumble, and you just chose not to carry that forward in this second kind of reimagined part of your life?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. I tell the story that when I was 39 years old, I was the publisher of GQ magazine, which is a very heady job for a 39-year-old. I'd become the publisher when I was 34 as a young publisher, and I was living, you can imagine, a great kind of experience, professional experience. But I realized at the time that I was sort of my only identity. I had a great family life, love life, all of the above, but my only identity was all in one basket. And that was the identity of being the publisher of GQ. And I had a boss who said something to me that was like a lightning bolt, who said, you have to remember that the seat you sit in is a rented seat. A job, unless your name is on the door, a job is a seat you sit in. And if you put all your eggs in that identity, it's not going to end well. So I created is I had this like bolt of lightning at 39, and it could happen at any time that I needed to build new kinds of identities. And in the book, we have a concept called life layering, which is how you build other identities and personas And so, over the next decades, I started really building other identities for myself. So when the day came that I was no longer a publishing executive, I was the president and publishing director of Hearst Magazines, big, heady job. When the day came that I stepped out of that role, I had lots of other identities and I had lots of other ways to define myself. And so I think many people get lost in their identity. They have an identity crisis when they leave a main career or they leave a profession if they haven't thought this through. So in the book we have a lot of fun processes, a toolkit to test to get yourself on that road. One of my identities was to become an adventurer in lots of different ways. I became a private pilot. I climbed mountains. I did all this stuff that was sort of feeding my adventure self, and still do that today. But you have to look at yourself in multiple identities, not just what you do for a living. That would be a good example.
That is a good example. Yeah, I like that. The seat that you rent. Another line that you have is that you didn't just retire, you refired. And I love that because that just says so much about you and this idea that you had to kind of pivot and to make your way into kind of this next area. Is there a part of this kind of all of this, success and everything that you've achieved that you look at as being perhaps not the same as somebody else would? Sometimes we overvalue or even overestimate certain things as we get a little bit older and midlife. Maybe some things look a little bit differently than they have previously. Any feelings that you have about some things that you accomplished early that you look at now and you say, well, maybe that wasn't so impressive?
Yeah, well, I think that I'm going to go back to where I came from. And I've been very fortunate to have a really blessed life. And it's a combination of hard work and luck and timing and focus and discipline. And, one of the things when I look back to date and I say, wow, how did I get here? Um, it's an alchemy of a variety of things, but we always have to be looking forward because, I'll go, you can't live on what you were. You have to always live on who you will be. So my 40-year career in the magazine business was a phenomenal career. I was the chairman of the Magazine Publishers of America. I was president of I helped launch Oprah's magazine, many magazines, amazing, wonderful career. But that was then. And, I don't sit there and talk about that this is who I am any longer. It's part of my life and part of my story. But I'm really focused on moving it forward, or as we like to say, roar forward. To be able to do what is the next thing. Because life is dynamic and we always have to be dynamic in what we're doing next. And so I'm really focused more on that part now.
When we come back, Michael Clinton is going to share the moment he realized success alone wasn't enough. Why so many people unknowingly start acting old years too early. And the one question you should be asking yourself right now if you want the second half of your life to be your most meaningful yet. You're going to want to hear this. Stay with us. We will be right back with Michael Clinton.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
I mentioned that support for today's episode comes from Wayfair, and the timing is perfect because it's Way Day at Wayfair. From April 25th through the 27th, Wayfair is running the best deals in home. I'm talking up to 80% off with fast and free shipping on everything during Way Day. And here's what I appreciate. At this stage of life, a home isn't about more stuff. It's about choosing a few smart pieces that make life easier and make it easier to be together. That's exactly why we went to Wayfair and bought a game table that we absolutely love. It's compact, it tucks away unobtrusively, and then it opens up into a full family game experience, the kind of setup that turns an ordinary evening into laughter stories and time with the people you care about. It fits our space and our life. With the new grandson in our lives, we just love having this game table. It makes all the difference in our family room. Shopping for it was straightforward because Wayfair makes it simple to narrow down what works for your home, your style, your size, your budget. The reviews really help, and there are thousands of 5-star reviews, so you can feel confident you're choosing well. And if you want a truly seamless experience, installation and assembly services are available. Man, does that help. Some of the larger pieces, putting those together takes a little bit of effort. And, as you get a little older, a little bit of installation and assembly service goes a long way. One more tip. Look for Wayfair Verified. It's your shortcut to the good stuff. Their product specialists vet items by hand using a 10-point quality inspection so you can feel good about what you're bringing into your home, no matter your budget. As I say, this episode is sponsored by Wayfair, and I'm just telling you once again, we're sharing our own experience. We actually bought our Wayfair game table ourselves. Wayday is the sale to shop. The best deals in the home are available to you. We're talking up to 80% off with fast and free shipping on everything. Head to wayfair.com April 25th through the 27th to shop Wayday. That's Wayfair, WAYFAIR.com. All of this will be in our show notes today, but remember, Wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Thanks, everybody.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Our guest, of course, is Michael Clinton, author of the wonderful book, Roar. We'll have links so that our audience can find out more about Michael's work, specifically Roar, and all the great things that Michael is talking about. Congratulations on just an amazing career, Michael. Your work at Hearst, your work at Esquire. I was a longtime paper magazine subscriber of Esquire, and I always loved getting those issues in the mail. And I think today, as we think about our second half of our lives, we look to books. Certainly, this roadmap and the work that you've done here is really a great way for us to kind of fine tune some of that. And I wonder when you think about the framework that you've identified in Roar, is there something about as we own who we are? Is there something about purpose or identity that just can't be structured into a framework?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the idea of the book is to just, you said it, it's a good word, is to create a framework, right? And to give people sort of a user-friendly way to think about how they may want to move forward in the future. And the A, it's an acronym. ROAR is an acronym. R is the reimagination process, and developing that is part of your everyday practice. O is, as you mentioned, own your numbers, own your health numbers, your financial numbers, own your age, which we'll get into. A is the action plan, and R is the reassessment of your relationships, especially when you're in the second half of your life. But I think the action plan, the A piece, is the critical piece, because the people that I interviewed in the book, and we call these people the reimagineers, the people who really pivoted and changed, made decisions in the second half. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, but you have to. 50% of it is in your head. Before you start making the change, you have to spend a lot of internal time to get to a place where you say, I want to make a change in whatever aspect of your life, or I want to move forward in whatever aspect of your life. So, and some people say, well, I'm really happy with my life, and, I don't want to make any changes. Well, life is dynamic, and sometimes if you don't make change happens to you. And so, you have to always be thinking about what might be the next. So it's not a dogmatic framework. It's a guideline as to how you can approach it if you are interested in evolving and going to a next place. So I like to call it framework light. That makes sense.
Good. I love that. That's great. Very
Yeah.
work-life. Well, let's talk a little bit about aging then and ageism, because you really have pushed back hard against ageism in the culture. And uh, my hat's off to you for that. I felt sometimes a little bit stifled by aging, frankly. I get maybe a little bit down on myself. Have you ever felt that way? And what have you done in the moment to kind of challenge perhaps your own thinking about ageism?
It's we live in a culture that is ageist, and a lot of
Yeah.
ageist signals that come our way. The good news is it's changing,
Mhm.
and it's going to change. It's going to change rapidly because if you look at the 50 plus population in America today, it is over 30% of the population. And by the way, the first millennials turn 50 in 4 years. So
Wow.
you're going to have this huge generation that's bigger than the boomers moving into the second half of their lives. And there's a completely new definition of what it means to be 50, 60, 70, 80 today. And fortunately, there are a lot of amazing role models who are the cultural symbols. I love the Golden Girls were in their 50s, right? You know
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that story. And
Great.
so
Yeah.
the Sex and the City women today are in their 50s. I mean, that's what it looks like. I mean, Oprah is 72. That's what 72 looks like. Meryl Streep. We can go down, Jane Fonda, we can go down a list, men and women. We're beginning to see different visuals of what 60, 70, 80 can look like.
Mhm.
Uh, a lot of it, we live in a celebrity-driven culture, so a lot of it comes from those cues. But it's changing. I'm seeing it change, right in front of us, and the sheer number of people are going to change the conversation and start stripping away a lot of the ageism that has traditionally existed primarily in the US. If you go to other parts of the world, I was just in Japan and Korea, very, very different attitudes about people who are 50, 60, 70. But all of us g- get um, get affected by it. There's a wonderful book by a psychologist at Yale by the name of Becca Levy called
Mm,
Brain
mm,
Age Code. You
mm.
familiar with it? And
Yeah.
Becca's work, she's a friend. Becca's work is that if you have a positive attitude about aging, it adds 7.5 years to your life. And
Wow.
just the mental piece of being pro age, being proud of age, owning your age. It's hard because it's the culture pushes back, but the more people who say, I'm 70 and this is what 70 looks like, um, the better we'll all be. So it's a people's movement. We call it the social movement of our time because the people are going to force the issue ultimately. But we all get affected by it for sure.
For sure. Michael Clinton, in your travels and in this great life that you lead, your public speaking engagements, you've met so many people who are in this category of reimagining themselves. And I wonder if you have a story of someone that perhaps not necessarily because of such a dramatic way in which they live, but maybe a quietly human kind of purpose-driven life that stayed with you and really influenced you in your research for the book and in some of your travels. You met somebody like that?
Gosh, so many stories.
Yeah.
So many stories. I think one of the stories, in the interviews, I wanted to talk to people at all levels of
Uh-huh.
socioeconomic. Uh, I just didn't want to speak to people who are privileged and top of the pyramid. I want to speak to everyday people.
Mhm.
And I met a guy. I talked to a guy who was he wasn't quite working class, but he was sort of middle class into working class, and his wife came home one day and said, "I'm leaving. I want a divorce." And his kids were grown up, and he had no idea what he was going to do with himself, and he lost his job on top of it. So this guy really, and he started driving a bus, a school
Mm,
bus,
mm.
and he started to meet some other people who invited him to join their sort of social group. And he ended up going on a cruise with a bunch of people, and he found out that he loved to dance. So he came back home to upstate New York, and he started going out to some social events, and he met a woman who also liked to dance, and he completely reinvented himself with both he became an officiant, where he was marrying
Yeah.
people, and he
Yeah.
completely reinvented his life. And it's a very simple story, but it was about moving forward. Another story that I would tell you is a guy by the name of Tim Minnick, and I wrote about him in Men's Health magazine. People can look it up. Tim was, had a business. His wife got ill and passed away, and he was grieving in his 60s, and he didn't know what to do with himself. And he started going to a local gym. He had never been to a gym before, but he said, "I need to like vent and find a release of some sort." Anyway, he became a bit of a gym rat, if you will, and the locals, the local gym owners noticed him and started having him do some classes and teach some classes. And to make a very long story short, Tim is now 82 years old. He is the oldest fitness instructor in the Guinness Book of Records.
Oh,
He
wow.
lives in Texas. He spends all his time basically training people over 60,
Huh.
particularly those who've had illnesses or, uh, broken bones, or helping them get back and gain their strength. And you can look up his story, Tim Minnick, Minnick. Great story of reinvention. And there are many men and women who were in the book. And on our website, which is roarforward.com, we have a tab called Reimagineers.
Mhm.
See all the stories. They're great inspirational stories of people who've done all sorts of amazing things. One woman quit her corporate job after 25 years and became a flight attendant.
Uh-huh.
She loves the life of being a flight attendant. And so,
That's funny.
it goes all which ways.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
love their stories. They're really inspirational stories.
That's wonderful. Thank you. We will definitely get that link to Men's Health. We'll put links so our audience can find out all about Michael Clinton's work, including Roar Forward and the Reimagineers and all of those wonderful folks. I want to ask just a couple kind of final questions, Michael, because I know you're very busy and we so appreciate your time. But I want to take you someplace a little reflective. I want to ask you about your 30-year-old self. And if that 30-year-old self met you today, what do you think would surprise him most about who it is that you've become?
It's a great question. That I'm one of the lucky people who got to ultimately live the life that I set out to live. And, I reached the height of my profession, healthy and happy, traveled to 126 countries, still running marathons, being a philanthropist, starting a foundation, serving on nonprofit boards, having a loving family. Pretty darn good, pretty darn good. I've been, when you're 30, you're still kind of a little bit of a blank slate. Um, but I've been fortunate in that, that that life has worked out pretty well thus far. So I'd be I'd be happy for myself, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. I love that. Well, final question for you, Michael Clinton. In my research of you, I found that you said that you're not going to go quietly into the night. I will tell you, my own mom is. I'll personalize this just a little bit. My own mom is 95. She's definitely not going quietly into the night. I'm curious about what you believe about what that really means and what a well-lived life really means to you, especially on this. We're talking on a Wednesday afternoon. It's a beautiful day here in Northern Virginia. I hope the same for you. How are some of the little moments of your day today, the real life part of it?
Well, I'm in New York City, and one of my great moments in New York City, for those who know New York and Central Park, is we have something called off leash in the mornings with our dogs. I have a beautiful Vizsla named And our ritual is to be in Central Park in the morning. It's between 6 and 9 where she runs around and plays with other dogs. And I see people who have, it's a very, very special moment. A moment of joy that we always have to capture in our day, the things that bring us that joy. But, one of the things about living a well-lived life is we have to, only 25% of our longevity is genetic. And, there's been some debate at some recent studies that's saying, well, maybe it's more. But I think that most of the science and doctors say that 75% of our well-being, living a longer, healthier life, is in our hands. So what does that mean? Movement, 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 exercise, exercise, movement until the day we die. My dad lived to 92. I would say in the last year of his life, he was very sedentary, and that was the long slide. So we have to always be moving. How you eat, what we eat, sleep, purpose. As I mentioned, I was just in Japan. Ikigai is a word you might know. It's the inherent need for purpose. We are human beings that need to have a purpose. And so if you're going to retire at 65 and live to 95, you better have some purpose in that 30-year gap. As I like to tease everyone to say, you can't play golf for 30 years. Um, so you need purpose, you need relationships, you need community. Those are things that we all have control over. So regardless of how long we get to live, a well-lived life is one that is, healthy and mind, body, spirit, great relationships. So many of those things we can control, and they can be very simple in our everyday lives, even if it's doing your 10,000 steps. And I track on my Oura Ring my 10,000 steps every day. So, it's so many of those things. You don't have to boil the ocean. You can have a lot of fulfillment in some of those basic things.
Michael Clinton, author of the fabulous book, Roar, into the second half of your life before it's too late. Roar Forward. All of Michael Clinton's great work will be in our show notes with links. Please check this book out. It is wonderful. I loved that CBS News says, Roar teaches people how to thrive and live a more satisfying life. I just think that says it. Michael, your work has just been inspiring. It's been so nice to talk to you. And I'll just say selfishly, please come back. I'd love to talk to you more about all the things that you're doing, because it's just exciting and it really is invigorating for all of us to get your perspective on this.
It was a great pleasure, and I'm always happy to chat with you again. You have good questions. Wow, marathon questions. So thank you so much for having me.
What a remarkable conversation here on our Good Housekeeping, Good, Better, Best interview series with Michael Clinton. What a powerful reminder that the second half of life isn't a slow fade. It's an open door. A door to curiosity, to growth, to new purpose, and maybe most importantly, to asking yourself questions you've been too busy or perhaps too cautious to ask. Michael Clinton leaves us with something both simple and profound. This idea that aging isn't about limitation, it's about possibility, but only if we're willing to challenge the stories we've been told and the ones we tell ourselves. So maybe the takeaway today is this. No matter where you are or how many chapters you've already lived, there is still time to reimagine what comes next. My thanks to Michael Clinton for joining us. His talk about refiring really has me intrigued, and I know you've enjoyed it. So please, join us again. This ongoing conversation about living well, staying engaged, and finding meaning at every stage of life is what Michael Clinton is all about. We're going to have him back at some point. You can learn more about Michael and his work at roarforward.com. Roar Forward. All of this will be in our show notes today. And as always, you can explore this episode and our full library at notold-better.com. This is Paul Vogel saying, I look forward to being with you again next time. So please be well in the meantime. Be safe. Let's talk about better. The Not Old, Better show on radio, podcast, video, everywhere that you can find us. Please check out our website for more details. You can find us on social media at Not Old Better. You'll get an insider's glimpse into everything that is not old, but better. So let's stay engaged. Let's keep moving forward. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next time.